Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the ePADD initiative. This is one of the IM Tech's knowledge shares, uh, which is really amazing. So we welcome everyone. So on the chat, I'm Maria Lim. I'm the chair of IM Tech Group. Um, Now, before we start, I just want to put your attention to the chat. Um, so everybody, in IM Tech, if this is the first time that you've been here, so we normally start in very British fashion. Just tell us where you are. So Shona is already there. I could see Shona. Tell us where you are and how the weather is like where you are. So I'm in West Sussex, and it's a bit sunny, just a bit. London is lovely and sunny. Ooh, Red is in Bath. Sheffield, Manchester. Oh, Melbourne. Oh gosh, Peter. Melbourne. Oh wow, Kuala Lumpur is sunny. It's evening, Raymond. So perfect. We love starting like this, guys. As somebody mentioned before, that's so British. So anyway, so Coppola will share that. So this is the ePADD initiative. It is something that I never thought we'll be able to do. It is something that I thought we won't be able to put together because of the organizations that we needed to put together to have something like this. So we've got Stanford, we've got Harvard, we've got the University of Manchester for our local our local component, and I know that we have a number of uh, higher education academe on the audience as well. I know the London School of Economics was asked to join us as well. So we are really quite grateful that we were able to get them here. Copolo, the next share that we have, please. So what I wanted to remind everyone is that we are going to record this session. And we're going to record this session, and this will be uploaded to the IRMS YouTube channel for everybody. Now, if you have attended today, for those of you who've attended this session today, you will receive a link to the actual recording after the webinar. The second thing is any materials that we will be sharing through IRMS with the IM Tech group and the Digital Preservation group of YANA. And I think that's me. Did I miss anything? I think I didn't miss anything. Oh, questions. So as you know how we do this one, please use the chat for the questions. There will be lulls in between the presentations. You can turn your audio on if you wish to, but we encourage you to put your questions on the chat so that we could yep, some of the guys could answer your questions straight away. Oh, from the Czech Republic. Hi, Paulina. The other thing that I wanted to say is, if not for this person who I'm going to introduce next, this wouldn't have happened as well, who introduced the concept of preservation by design. And please welcome our vice chair, Jana. Jana?
Oh, hello everybody and welcome to this, and a particular welcome to all of you DPC members who might be attending today. So some of you will have heard Tricia's workshop 3 weeks ago with DPC about foundations and methods of archiving email records. ePADD was part of that workshop, and I'm really looking forward to hearing a bit more about that today.
Thank you, Yana. And next, of course, is our Ren, our chair for IRMS, Ren Lemming.
Hello, everyone. All I'm really going to say is thank you for joining us, and thank you also to all our speakers and presenters for joining us. We have people from across the globe here. And Maria, thank you for your tireless work, as well as Yana, in organising this. It's a really relevant topic to all of us at the moment. So enjoy.
Okay, so now we are handing over the stage to Sally DeBauche from Stanford University, and we are removing our video right now and muting the microphone. Okay, Sally, it's all yours.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm going to share my screen.
Tell us a little bit something about yourself.
Yes, my name is Sally DeBauche. I'm a digital archivist at Stanford University. I'm located in San Francisco, California. It's cold and foggy this morning, which is kind of our normal weather. Thank you, everyone, for the invitation to be here today. It's great to be able to join you. And thanks for everyone who organized this meeting. I'm going to be giving an overview of the ePADD project and software, as well as demonstrating some of the features of the software that may be of interest to all of you as information professionals engaged in the care and preservation of email. So before we get into the discussion of ePADD itself, I want to give a little bit of context on the landscape of email collecting and preservation more broadly. Email is a hugely important form of historical documentation. It truly is the modern form of correspondence. And it's also so ubiquitous. And even though we have many other ways now to communicate, it still tends to be the main form of communication in business, and is heavily relied on by people for personal communication as well. So because of that, email is absolutely rich for research. It's such a comprehensive form of documentation of our work, creative processes, relationship with friends, family, professional colleagues, and it does so in a very complex, interconnected way. Yet it's pretty rare to find email collections accessible to researchers at libraries and archives, as well as in government or corporate records keeping settings. So clearly there is a disconnect here. And I think the fact is that email collecting, processing, preserving, and preservation and providing access, it comes with some major challenges to email account holders or donors, collecting institutions, as well as researchers who may seek to use it. First, because we all use email constantly for various functions, both personal and professional, email accounts tend to be include a lot of personal or sensitive information that email account holders may prefer not to share with collecting institutions, and that our institutions may not be able to make available to researchers for both legal and ethical reasons. And then aside from ethical concerns, email presents a number of technical challenges too. In a report released in 2018, by the Task Force on Technical Approaches for Email Archives, the authors say, quote, "Email is not one thing, but a complicated interaction of technical subsystems for composition, transport, viewing, and storage," end quote. And added to that, historically, there's never been one single file format for email that has been uniformly adopted. So we're dealing with a lot of different file formats. And then lastly, email collections can be large. And, we're talking about millions or tens of millions of messages, perhaps. The scale that these collections can grow to really only compounds the first two issues, in addition to making it more difficult for managers and researchers alike to effectively find what they need in a collection. So with a little understanding on the significance of email, as well as some of the challenges that prevent more institutions from collecting it and making it accessible, I want to turn to ePADD and how it fits into this landscape. So ePADD was developed to address many of the challenges that I just laid out, helping our institutions to collect, process, and provide access to email. First, ePADD provides tools to help archivists and records managers screen email for sensitive, restricted, or legally protected information. This sensitive information is often a major barrier to providing greater access to email collections, so the ability to restrict it and then provide a version of an email collection free from it is critical to our collecting institutions to actually allow researchers to use collections. ePADD provides tools to discover and analyze the intellectual content of email collections. One of the big challenges of email is scale, right? So whether you are an archivist or records manager processing a collection or a researcher trying to use a collection, you cannot possibly review every message in a collection. And it doesn't matter if you're looking at 10,000 messages or 10 million, we all need ways to efficiently find specific information within collections. And ePADD provides a range of methods to browse collections as well as perform targeted searches so that we can better understand the intellectual content of a collection. And then finally, ePADD enables research and scholarship using email collections of historic value in a few key ways. So ePADD has 2 modules geared towards researchers. I'm going to cover these in a lot more detail later, but I'll just mention them briefly. So first, the ePADD Discovery module allows collecting institutions to publish a redacted set of metadata about their email collections online. And second, the Delivery module allows institutions to provide a full text version of their processed collections, minus any restricted messages, to researchers in a physical location at their institution, like a reading room. Okay, so just to give a little background on ePADD, the software, it is a Java-based application supported by these operating systems and web browsers. It is a free and open source software. It incorporates concepts from computer science like machine learning, automated metadata extraction, and natural language processing to support the review, discovery, and access to email collections. And before we go any further, I need to pause and give a huge shout out to our project team, our funders, both past and present, and our amazing community of users. So currently our project team is made up of archivists, library administrators, and computer programmers from Stanford University, Harvard University, and the University of Manchester. We're working on a joint project to add functionality to better support preservation workflows and actions. And then I also want to give my appreciation for the granting organizations that have supplied all of the funding that has supported the development work that has taken to create and maintain the ePADD software, including the National Historical Public Archives and Records Commission, the Institute of Museum and Library Services, Stanford Libraries, and the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation. And then finally, we have a fantastic community of users. I don't think this list even covers all of them. And we are an open source project, so we welcome all feedback from our users. Their input is really critical to our future development. Okay, so I'll give you just a high-level overview of the ePADD software before we really take a look at it. So ePADD is structured into 4 modules, each corresponding to a phase in the processing workflow, and each with specific functionality geared toward the intended user at that stage in the workflow. The first module is the appraisal module. So this module is geared towards donors, curators, and archivists. It supports the ingest of email accounts into ePADD and contains functionality designed to help those users review an email collection and potentially identify and restrict sensitive information, as well as classify messages. The second module is the processing module. This is geared towards archivists and records managers and has the same functionality as the appraisal module, with the addition of tools to allow those users to disambiguate and confirm name authorities within a collection. And then finally, there are 2 modules geared towards researchers. So the discovery module is an optional module that can be hosted on a web server and supports public access to a redacted set of metadata for a collection. We're going to look at some examples of this later on, but it would include named entities, message headers, message dates, the name part of email addresses. And then finally, the delivery module is the module that is typically installed on a reading room workstation at a collecting institution, and it provides users with a full text version of a processed email collection, of course, omitting any messages that you have restricted. Okay, so I think with that, I'm going to switch over to the demo. So I'm going to exit my slides and show you ePADD. Are you all seeing that screen with the DeBauche email archive now? Yes. Okay, great.
Yes.
So this is ePADD. We're looking at the processing module now, to be specific. This sample set of email is from the DeBauche email archive. If you're wondering why are we looking at DeBauche, maybe you've heard why this archive is public. When he was running for president in 2016, he released his email from the time when he was governor of Florida. It's kind of an effort to show his transparency. Unfortunately, that email did include a lot of sensitive information that the citizens of Florida emailed him. And it was quickly taken down, but not before many people, including us, were able to capture it. But don't worry, this version has been completely scrubbed of any of that sensitive data. It's just for example purposes. But anyway, what we're looking at here is the main browse screen, which you will land on when you open ePADD. So across this screen, you can see these 9 tiles that give you different ways to browse through your collection. There's really no right or wrong order to go through these. It really just depends on the collection that you're working with and the goals that you have for it. So I'll just kind of go in order from left to right, top to bottom. Before we take a look at that, if we click on this eye icon, we'll be able to see some high-level information about the collection itself. So we can see the date range of the messages, the number of messages, and the number of attachments. If we click on correspondence, we'll be able to see a list of correspondence within the collection. If we select a correspondent, we'll be able to see the messages associated with just that correspondent, in this case, 1749. And this is a typical view of a message, a single message in ePADD. So we can navigate back and forth between messages. They're organized chronologically, earliest to latest, and we can use these arrows to navigate through them. You can also see on the left-hand side, we can further narrow down this subset of messages with these facets based on information present in the messages. If there are any attachments present associated with the message, they'll appear at the bottom here. And then I'll show you that you can apply labels to messages. So there's a set of default labels that comes with ePADD, but they are completely customizable. You can add any number of labels that you would like, depending on your collection. Applying labels is also the mechanism that you'll use to restrict messages. So for example, if I've identified some information in a message that I do not want to be accessible to researchers in the reading room, I would apply a do not transfer label. And that means that when I export this collection from this module to the subsequent modules, these messages with the label applied will not export. So labeling is a very important activity in ePADD. You can also bulk apply labels. So you can, if you've determined that all of the messages in this set need to have some label attached, you can apply all of them at once rather than doing them one at a time. You can also create annotations. So these are kind of like free text notes that you can add to specific messages or all messages. They appear kind of like a sticky note on your message. Okay, I'll go back to the main browse screen now. We'll take a look at entities. And entities are important to point out here because they are very important in the discovery module. So ePADD uses a custom natural language processing toolkit bootstrapped from DBpedia to automatically identify and extract these entities. And so they're grouped in these broad categories. If we take a look at one of them, we can see the entities that have been identified for this person category. And then if we were to click on this, we would get just a subset of the messages associated with this entity. Okay, so we'll go back to the browse page. I'll show you labels quickly. So this is the screen that you would come to if you wanted to create new custom labels. You can simply just type in the information about the label that you'd like to add, and you can choose whether it's a general label or a restriction label that has some type of actionable component to it. Okay, back to browse. So there are two ways to view attachments in ePADD. You can either choose to look at just the image attachments by themselves, or you can look at all attachments together. So we'll take a look at all attachments. These are displayed, again, chronologically, this time by year. I think because this is a small sample set, there's only attachments from this 1 year. But if there were other years, you could toggle between them using those arrows. You can see here that we have the total number of attachments, 288, with 88 duplicates in the year 2003. And then similar to the message screen, you can further winnow this set down using these facets. So you'll notice that certain attachment types, image attachment types, ePADD will render right within the application itself, so you'll be able to view those. Other attachment types are not necessarily able to be rendered within ePADD. For example, you'll see these Word documents and these PDFs are not. If you find an attachment that you would like to review that is not able to be rendered in ePADD, you would simply download it and open it in whatever application is appropriate for that type of file. Okay, we'll go back to browse. And then I want to point out the lexicon search because this is a feature that I find very useful. I think it's very important for identifying specific kinds of information, and especially reviewing sensitive information. So lexicons I kind of think of as pre-bundled bulk keyword searching. So we have lexicons based on these different categories, and we'll take a look at sensitive. And then we have these kind of subcategories around different themes. And so each of these contains a series of terms that it is searching on. And you can see the number of messages associated with each of those categories. If we click on Edit Lexicon, we can actually see the specific terms that are included in each one. And like I said, these are pre-bundled. This is how they would come by default, but they are also completely customizable. So if you find that you need to add a new term, you can simply do that here. If you find that a term is not really serving your purposes for your search, you can also just delete it. Very easy to edit these lexicons. And in addition to editing the lexicons that are already here, you can create entirely new lexicons if you have a collection that merits it, or if your organization maybe has certain terms that you would be interested in screening for. And you can see actually that, you know, based on the names of some of these, they are actually contributed by some of our users. This one is from Duke, this one's from New York Public Libraries. So if you do create a lexicon that you feel would benefit, you know, the broader community, please get in touch with us because we may be able to add it to the default set that is included. Okay, so those are kind of the ways to browse collections. If you know what you're looking for, you can also do more targeted searching too. So we have a simple keyword search. We have something called the multi-entity search, which is a really interesting way to search where you can actually take some text from outside ePADD and copy paste it or type it into this box, and ePADD will identify all of those extracted entities that are present within the text that you supplied that match text from the email collection. So kind of an interesting way to search there. You can do a multi-term search, so you can just type or paste multiple terms, one per line in the search box, and search all of them at once, which can be very efficient. A little bit like a lexicon, but without, but you can kind of just do it on the fly if you want to just test something to see how it searches. You can also do a correspondent list search. So rather than searching one correspondent at a time, if you have a whole list that you need to search on, you can search them all at once. And then finally, there's a very comprehensive advanced search form where you can search on basically any field within the messages that you can think of. Okay, and then I'll show you the authorities tab. So ePADD, if you are noticing that you have names coming up within your collection that could be ambiguous or could be multiple individuals potentially, you may want to go to the extra step of confirming some of those name authorities. So you can see here that ePADD has identified a name within the collection and then identified potential matches. It also supplies the relevant authority file records that you can click out to kind of do some further research if you need to, in order to be able to disambiguate that authority, and then you can confirm them within ePADD. So that may be a useful extra step to take in processing your collection. Okay, back to browse. So I kind of have breezed through this functionality pretty quickly. If you saw anything that you would like me to explain further, or if you're thinking about a specific task and wondering how would you accomplish it with ePADD, I think we'll have time for questions at the end. Otherwise, always happy to help folks one-on-one to strategize how they might process their collection. So please just get in touch with us if you have more questions. But I'm going to go back to my slides if I can. Okay. Okay, just a few more things before I wrap up. I wanted to give a couple of updates on recent developments from the past year or so, just to make you aware of them. So first, we redeveloped ePADD's discovery module. And as I said, this is the module that is optional for institutions to use to publish a redacted set of metadata online to help users find your collections. So as I said, this only displays a redacted view of the collection, but I wanted to give you a little more depth about what exactly a user finding your collection online would be able to see and what they would not be able to see. So what they will see includes collection level metadata, similar to an archival finding aids front matter. So this would include the name of the collection, date range of messages, number of messages and attachments, a scope and contents note, biographical or historical note, contact information for your institution, should they have more questions. Within the collection itself, a user will be able to see redacted email headers, names of correspondents, but not the full email addresses, and those entities that ePADD automatically extracted. We just took a look at those in the processing module. So what they will never be able to see, they will never see the full text of email messages, full email addresses for correspondence, or any attachments at all, not even the file names of attachments. So hopefully you're able to see this screenshot reasonably well. This is the view of a typical message in the discovery module. So you can see there you have the message header. At the top in the main section of the body is the body of the message text. So the words that you're able to see within that body are those extracted entities. And then all of the dots in between represent the rest of the text of the message that has been redacted. So the goal with this module is to provide users with as much metadata in context as possible while still protecting the privacy of the email account holder and all third parties contained within that collection. And the fact that the metadata is represented within its proper context is a really key point, because it provides a much richer discovery experience for users than simply giving them like a list of subject terms or correspondence like you would typically see in a catalog record or a finding aid. So that functionality that I just described, that was present in the previous version of the ePADD discovery module. The redevelopment work was really that we undertook last year was really to enable more institutions to make use of the module. So the common feedback from users that already used ePADD to process their email collections was that while they were interested in setting up the discovery module, they didn't feel like they had the time, the resources, maybe the technical support on staff to do that. And we felt that the simplest and best solution would be to just open up the existing Stanford ePADD discovery module to other institutions, and hoping that in doing that, we could both increase the community of email metadata contributors while also creating a better experience for researchers by creating this unified discovery platform for email collections. So I have to pause and highlight the amazing work and contributions of the working group that volunteered to help us design, test, and roll out this new version of the discovery module. They helped us to define the requirements for all of the new screens and functionality that we added to the software. And they also contributed to the development of a set of guidelines for the continued governance of the community of metadata contributors. So, as I mentioned, we made a few key additions and changes to the discovery module. So first, we acquired the URL epadd.org. If you want to go check that out and poke around what's there now, you can. The previous URL was epadd.stanford.edu. So we wanted to provide a way for institutions to be able to reference the website without it appearing to be associated with another institution. Secondly, we added some new screens and functionality to support the display of collections from multiple institutions. So we added a browse repositories page and a repository information page. That is what you're looking at on the screen right now. It displays information about a contributing repository, including a brief description, a logo, contact information, as well as all of their associated collections. And then we created some new documentation for contributors to the shared discovery module that includes all of the important information specific to contributing metadata. And I'll just give a little plug here. If you already use ePADD at your institution to process email collections and you're interested in contributing your metadata, please get in touch with us. We would love to hear from you, and we can talk about how to do that. Okay, so what is next for the ePADD project? We're currently working on a grant-funded project funded by the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation through the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. That's in collaboration with the University of Manchester and Harvard University Libraries, called ePADD Plus. I know that Jessica and Tricia are going to be giving you all of the details about that, so I won't say too much more, but that is our current focus. And just to wrap up here, I'll say, as an open source software development project, we are always looking to engage with our community of users. If you use ePADD at your institution to process email collections, we would love to hear about your experience. And please consider sharing your work with the broader community too, as I think it can really be an amazing source of help and encouragement to others who are looking to begin processing and providing access to email collections. If you have the technical skills and a specific use case or a need that is not currently represented in the software, you can contribute to the code itself. Our GitHub is on the last slide. You can check that out. You can also participate in software testing for new versions of the software. I believe we will have opportunities to do that later this year or next year. And there is no technical expertise necessary to do this testing. So if you are interested in participating, please get in touch with us. And then finally, if you are working or working on a project or planning work that you feel might complement the ePADD project, we would love to hear from you too. We're always looking for ways to collaborate with others across the information management community to address these challenges that we all have in preserving and processing email collections. So with that, I'll just leave you with these links and say thank you so much again for the invitation to be with you today and for organizing this meeting. You can check on progress of our project at our project website there. You can also follow us on Twitter. You can join our mailing list to get updates on the project too. To download the latest versions of the software, just go to our GitHub site. And then finally, if you have any questions at all that we're not able to get to today, please feel free to get in touch with us at the email at the bottom of that slide. I am the person who answers that email, so you can get in touch with me there. Thank you.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Sally. I think we've got several questions here. So one of them has been answered by Paul Carlyle at Manchester. So with the calendar entries, but James Clarkson said, what about tasks and notes in Outlook?
Yeah, that's a great question. Currently, ePADD does not support displaying tasks and calendar items in from Outlook. The reason for that is that ePADD, the format that it imports is called MBOX, if you're familiar with email file formats at all. And the MBOX format does not accommodate those types of features from Outlook, unfortunately. So it's just not possible at this time to render those in ePADD. But I definitely agree that they contain a lot of important context. So I understand where you're coming from.
Okay. Another question by James. He's probably on this night right now. James, you need to get in touch with Sally. So he says, how much space is taken up with the indexes versus original data? Example, 20% overhead, 200% overhead, etc.
That's a great question. I am not sure off the top of my head. I would have to look at a few examples to find that out. I'm sorry. But if you get in touch with me, I'd be happy to look into that and let you know.
Okay, there you go, James. Please do get in touch with Sally. Yes, that's great. And then, thanks so much, Sally. Now we're going to move on to those who have joined the ePADD initiative to tell us about their experiences. So those of you on this call who might be interested, I see a lot of organizations represented with higher education and with the National Archives. So let's have a look at, first of all, the University of Manchester with Jess. Jess, there we go. So Jess, we'll hand over to you and the experience at the university with this one, introducing yourself and Paul in the process.
Great, thank you very much. I'll just share my screen. Great. Is that working? Everybody see that?
Yes, we could.
Fantastic.
Yes.
Great. So hello and thank you to Maria and the IRMS for asking us to speak today. I'm going to give a quick overview of the progress on the Palladium project, and then Paul is going to talk a bit about our experiences of appraisal using ePADD thus far. So since 2012, we've been acquiring the email archive of indie poetry publisher Carcanet Press. We've brought in 3 accessions, the first 2 consisting of about 300,000 items, and the third, which we acquired in 2020, of over 500,000 items. The email archive is preserved in our digital preservation system, Preservica, and this year we've introduced appraisal and management of the collection via ePADD. In 2019, we were successful in securing funding from the Arts Council England Designation Development Fund for a project called Providing Access to Large Literary Archives in a Digital Medium, or Palladium for short. We began in February of this year, so we're just over halfway through now. So as you'll hear in a minute, the concurrently running ePADD Plus project is developing preservation functionality for ePADD, and this has really freed us up to use Palladium to focus on the later workflow stages of appraisal, management, and access. Our experiments in mediated access include collaborative appraisal with selected poets whose email features in the archive. We're also working with researchers to explore the potential for large anonymized data sets, which ePADD can produce for digital humanities research. So thanks to Stanford's generosity in making ePADD open source, if there's new or amended functionality we'd like to explore, it's completely possible to do so. I also knew that achieving this was entirely beyond my capabilities as an archivist. So when we were devising Palladium, we included funding for a developer. And we're incredibly fortunate to be able to work with an in-house development team at the library. And my colleague Jochen was able to come aboard. Sally and Stanford have also kindly agreed to look at what we produce and consider its inclusion in the main ePADD code if it has wider applicability. So at this point, I feel the need to add a disclaimer, as the challenges and solutions I'm about to talk about are very much described in layman's terms. Happily, Jochen is here attending the meeting, so if you have any further questions, he is around. So the first of the challenges we encountered is that importing large files encountered memory issues. Or I know the latest upgrade of ePADD has improved this, but our largest mbox file was 15 gigabytes, and ePADD was just crashing at some point during the ingest. This was partly because the messages were being imported in batches of 10,000, and the process wasn't taking into quite the size of the messages within the batch. So the fix for this was Jochen was able to reduce the batch size of the import to 100 messages. ePADD was able to read that with no issues, and there doesn't seem to be an impact on performance. We also discovered that for appraisal, it is really useful to be able to see each level of the folder structure of an email account when viewing an individual email. So some Carcanet email accounts have very complex folder structures, which can only really be made sense of if you can see the whole chain. So we've been successful in displaying that data. This was achieved with a script for manipulating the names of the mbox files before import so that they can be representative of the folder structures. So the other big piece of development work we're undertaking is exploration of the potential to redact message text rather than restrict access to an entire message. We have a very short demo of what we've been working on here, so hopefully this will work with me. Great, so this is Jochen navigating his way through our version of ePADD, bringing up an email, getting rid of the credit card number that is displayed within said email, and replacing it with some asterisks. And as you can see now, when you go to that email, the credit card number is redacted, but the rest of the email is fine. Fantastic. So this is very much a work in progress, this redaction plan, and we're still very much considering the parameters for using this functionality in a way in which we can still be confident in record integrity. But it does have a lot of potential for increasing access to records where only a portion of the text is sensitive. Our plan at the moment is that ePADD will retain 2 copies of the message, one full and one redacted, which can be marked up appropriately for transfer or restricted as required. So, challenges. So when Carcanet's email was imported into ePADD, a number of Unicode characters started appearing in the messages for us. And when the emails were exported to mbox files and displayed in Thunderbird, the number of Unicode characters increased. We discovered this was partly because the format of the mbox files wasn't being quite read right in ePADD, and we were able to amend this. And the export issue was solved by updating the version of the decoder that ePADD was using. We also discovered that in some circumstances, for us, ePADD was picking up the word "from" followed by a space in the text in the text of an email and thinking it was the start of a new email and making 2 entries for it. So you'd have an email with header info and an email with truncated text and no header info. This was partly a format issue and partly due to an issue with ePADD's parser, which Jochen was able to fix for us. The solution we came up for the formatting issue is to actually add a hash at the end of the word "from" to ensure that ePADD's reader doesn't get confused. This seems to be working fine, and it doesn't interfere particularly with our ability to read the text. So it's a good way forward, we think. ePADD's reports give you really important information on duplicate email. And if an email appears in an mbox file more than once because it's part of a chain, for example, then ePADD will automatically deduplicate it. And we were getting different figures for this process on the summary report and the individual mbox file reports. owing to a couple of bugs in translating the text and the import process. We also noticed that the figures were being calculated slightly differently for different reports, and we're working on making that clearer in the report terminology. So our final challenge has been in our collaborative appraisal experiments with individual poets. I think our biggest issue was perhaps that we didn't convey exactly what we're proposing to do with the email clearly enough. Without seeing ePADD, it isn't always easy to comprehend what it does. So that was a very good lesson for us for future appraisal exercises. So that's it from me. I'm going to hand over to Paul now to tell you a bit about his experiences of appraisal.
Thanks, Jess. Oh, brilliant. Thank you very much. So my name's Paul Carlyle. I'm an archivist at the University of Manchester. I've been working on Palladium since the beginning of the year. For our appraisal work, we've tried to break the archive down into its constituent parts and then reduce the overall number of emails that are being considered for permanent preservation. We've also been looking at how records are reviewed for confidential or sensitive information. But the main purpose throughout really has been to experiment with the archive and find out what can be done with it and with ePADD as well. So before it was imported into ePADD, we did quite a lot of work with the archive. The most recent accession, for example, was analysed using Paraben Email Examiner, which we found very useful. The analysis produced reports on each individual mailbox, providing a comprehensive list of folders in each mailbox, as well as the total number of emails and attachments in each folder. We deleted many of the default folders created by Outlook, such as the recipient cache. And the deleted items folder in each PST file was emptied as well. Another advantage to having the reports is that we can see how individuals organise their email accounts. So it doesn't necessarily follow that just because someone has a folder structure that they follow it rigidly. But the folder structure offers a way of navigating the mailboxes, we've found. The ability to visualise and quantify the mailboxes in this way makes clear that the contrasts between them. So while one person might use many custom folders, another might use very few. Those mailboxes with very few custom folders present some obvious difficulties, of course. So, for example, it can be difficult to locate specific types of email or identify personal or sensitive information in an inbox that contains several thousand unsorted emails. But seeing the lack of structure also makes clear the parts of the archive that will require different search strategies, and that's what we've found so far. And the depositor relationship has been very important as well from the beginning. Our meetings with Michael Schmidt, who is the founder of Carcanet and its current managing director, have been very helpful. His thoughts on the archive and its contents have informed decisions about our list of record types and subject matter, which I'll discuss in a moment. And our meetings have helped contextualise parts of the archive whose significance would otherwise have not been fully understood. Next slide, please, Jess. Thank you. So we've developed selection criteria to help evaluate the emails, which we develop into a rubric of sorts. Carcanet first deposited its paper records with the library in 1978, and since then it has regularly transferred material for its archive. So even though the email archive can sometimes feel like a separate entity, largely because of its technical requirements, it's very much part of a larger Carcanet archive. So it made sense then to consider what continuities there are between the paper and digital records and what's unique to the email archive. So the criteria are not exhaustive or definitive, and they allow for some flexibility in the decision-making process. And the purpose really is to offer some direction to the appraisal and clarity about what kind of archive is being appraised. Because the email archive undoubtedly provides a partial snapshot of some aspects of digital life in the 21st century, spam, for example, but there are other examples as well. But primarily it's the archive of a long-standing internationally prominent literary publisher, and that's what's been prioritised during the selection process. We've also compiled a list of record types and subject matter found in the archive. So this includes records relating to Carcanet's activities as a publisher, but also records relating to employment, finances, facilities, and other very glamorous things as well. The next slide, please, Jess. Thank you. So in this first half of the project, we've concentrated on identifying emails that ideally we wouldn't want to preserve as part of the archive. And we've been working in the appraisal module that Sally described earlier. ePADD allows users to label emails that shouldn't be transferred to ePADD's processing discovery and or delivery modules, or which should be transferred with restrictions. So there are 3 default labels. but do not transfer is the only one that we've used up to now. It indicates that a message shouldn't be transferred to the next module. The top left image on the slide there, I don't know if people can see it very clearly, that shows how it looks when they're applied to an email, the ones in red there. We've applied labels to about 28,000 emails so far. And we've experimented with ePADD's different search functions again, which Sally described earlier on, and there are some examples on the slide here. Folder search is a very effective way of locating folders that were mapped earlier in the project. So in the example here, we've located one of the folders that we identified through the reports. Advanced search, which does do everything, a bit of everything, is a powerful and very useful tool. It can be used to structure searches of emails, attachments, as well as correspondence and certain expressions. So advanced search has been useful in identifying things like out-of-office emails. There are arguments for preserving those, of course, but we've used them as a test case, looking at how easy it is to identify them among several hundred thousand.
Did we just lose Paul, Carl?
I think we did.
Let us give him a few minutes.
Let's give him a second.
Yeah. Sorry, Paulina, I missed your question. So let me repeat it to everyone, just in case other attendees are interested. So Paulina asked, would complicated diacritic be a problem? And good thing Sally was able to catch it. So from Sally, ePADD doesn't currently have comprehensive support for all diacritics. So let the ePADD guys know if you have any errors with diacritics in your email collections. And Paul is back. We're bringing you back, Paul. There we go.
Yeah, sorry about that. I don't know what happened there. It just cut out. So apologies. I don't know where you where I left there actually. So I'll go back to advanced search. I'll just start with that. So advanced search is a powerful, very useful tool. It can be used to structure searches of emails, attachments, as well as correspondence and certain expressions. It's been a very useful way of identifying things like out-of-office emails, which we've been using as a test case, looking at how easy it is to identify them among several hundred thousand emails. So we discovered around 1,000 emails this way. I chose to go through each one just to make sure that they were genuine out-of-office emails. I found that all but about 40 or so were genuine, so it was a pretty successful search. Correspondent list search is a way of searching for emails sent or received by individual correspondents. So we've used this to search for emails from or to various Carcanet authors, but it's also worked well for identifying emails from businesses with whom Carcanet has accounts. So Carcanet's IT infrastructure is managed by a company called Aspire. The company's name features in the email addresses of all Aspire employees who've exchanged emails with Carcanet staff. So typing Aspire into the main search field produces a list of staff members and email addresses associated with the company. We can therefore select each of those addresses and apply the appropriate label. This approach works well for businesses, services, organizations whose emails take a regular form, for other standard names or addresses as well. Next slide, please, Jess. Thank you. And we've encountered a few issues during the project, and not really ePADD related either. It's more maybe to do with the nature of email appraisal anyway. So the three that have been on our minds most recently are those on the slide. So the earlier accessions were not subject to the same naming conventions as the recent ones. So the 2020 accession is the most recent. The first batch of emails were taken in about 10 years ago now. And the folder titles are not indicative of their content. So I've included a list of those folders on the slide. Collectively, these folders contain emails from 3 separate accounts covering a period of about 14 years. And some of the search strategies that we've used on the more recent accessions are maybe less useful here, with the exception of advanced search. But I think for the next phase of the project, we'll be experimenting with ePADD's lexicon and entity searches and plan to use these on the earlier accessions. Threads, so ePADD links correspondence that's part of a chain across mailboxes. So in certain instances, it's possible to locate emails in an unstructured email account by following the correspondence from a particular folder in another account. So in the example on the slide, we have an email relating to recruitment, and there are 7 emails in this particular thread. So we identify this email in an account that had a clear structure. Clicking on the envelope icon displays the 7 emails in this thread in chronological order. And that led us to a couple of related emails in another account that were on file by the account owner. So it's a very useful tool. But if you're in a folder and you want to bulk restrict all of the emails, you can do so. But it won't necessarily restrict all of the emails that form part of a thread relating to a particular email. So when labeling emails, depending on how you approach it, it may be necessary to open the thread and apply labels to any emails not caught by the bulk restrictions. This can be achieved swiftly in many cases, but others may prove more time consuming. And of course, it depends on how interventionist you want to be, I suppose, with the emails as well. And finally, something we worked on recently was identifying emails from or to students and staff at the University of Glasgow. Michael Schmidt, in addition to his responsibilities at Carcanet, has held various teaching posts over the years, including a professorship at the University of Glasgow as part of its creative writing programme. We've identified just under 1,000 emails with a University of Glasgow address, but discovered also, without any surprise really, that some students and staff use private email addresses to conduct university business. So although we've succeeded in identifying many of those, we're still unsure just how precise we can be in searches of this kind as well, and how long it would take really to track down all those emails. But that's something we're going to continue to work on over the next few months. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jess and Paul. That was quite very, very interesting. So I was looking at, are there any questions? What we're going to do is move swiftly to the presentation of Harvard University. That's Tricia and Stephen. And then we could get back. I don't think I missed any questions this time, but let's move on, and then we could have our chat afterwards. Tricia, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I think it's up okay. Can everyone see that okay? Yes.
Yes, it is.
Great.
Tricia.
Thank you so much. Well, hello. Echoing Jess and Paul and Sally, thank you all so much for having us here today to tell you about all of this email and ePADD work. I am Tricia Patterson, Senior Digital Preservation Specialist at Harvard Library, and our Head of Digital Preservation and the PI on the project I'll be introducing is here. He just posted in the chat here, Stephen Abrams. He's lurking in the audience, ready to answer questions that come up along with our other project partners. But I'll be giving y'all an overview of the ePADD Plus project today. So to better understand the ePADD Plus project, I'm going to go back in time a little bit and talk about the foundations of the project, the initial tools, literature, and use cases that helped us develop the vision for the project. So over a decade ago, really in 2008 or so, Harvard Library found itself first grappling with the challenge of email archiving. At the time, however, there weren't really any great tools for stewarding email records through the records lifecycle, from acquisition and appraisal to processing, preservation, discovery, and delivery. So Harvard did what it did a lot back then. When they couldn't find tools that suited their needs, they built their own. Harvard's email archiving service, an interface of it pictured here, it's also called EASE for short, was developed kind of slowly and very intentionally between 2009 to 2011. It's been and continues to be our homegrown email archiving tool since then, and it supports processing and preservation, packaging, and deposit of email records. But over the past decade, many tools have populated the landscape. ePADD emerged around the same time as EASE did for us, actually. And because EASE, sorry, some outside window noise, it's not totally closed. But because EASE is an open source it was difficult to have it interact with other tools. For example, if you wanted to acquire and appraise email with one tool, process and preserve with ease, and access with another. In 2017, and I'm going to be linking to some stuff here as well, the Council on Library and Information Resources, or CLIR, assembled a task force on technical approaches for email archives. And folks from Stanford and Harvard were actually worked on that task force, and Sally mentioned this same report earlier. It's a really great report. I'm going to post it here in the chat if you want to take a look at it. And the task force conducted a really fantastic review of existing tools, challenges, and opportunities, and they assembled some high and low level recommendations for the email archiving community. Recommendations meant to give the community really clear directions that would enable progress. So I won't get into all the recommendations, but some of the high level ones are here. They really surrounded community development and advocacy, as well as tool support development and testing. And if you open up the report, the recommendations actually start on page 76. And one of the fine level recommendations under tool support development and testing was to sustain and integrate existing tools, because so many had proliferated that supported different parts of the life cycle. So I brought out a quote here from page 86 of the report, and I'll just read it for anyone that isn't able to see this later on or is for accessibility reasons. Could some of the tools be integrated into existing consortia or projects? If not, and the trend continues wherein different organizations manage different tools, how difficult will it become for each institution to administer these tools and justify separate expenses? Well, that convinced us. So in 2018, Harvard Library prioritized the redeployment of ease as an open source tool for better interoperability and sustainability. Simultaneously, we entered into a collaboration with Stanford. It was phase 3 of development for ePADD that Sally was going over a little bit earlier with some of the discovery work they were doing at the time. And we entered that partnership at the time to better align ePADD and ease so that we can minimize, needless replication of function between the two and support more seamless interoperation. We weren't necessarily thinking about directly integrating at the time. We're more just exploring our development roadmaps and trying to get them to start coming closer in together. Meanwhile, Stanford had been hearing from the University of Manchester, as Sally and Jess and Paul mentioned, about their amazing Palladium project and their work adapting the ePADD code to meet their needs. And very astutely, our partners at Stanford picked up on some of the crossover objectives and played matchmaker with us. And in 2020, as we were all beginning to brainstorm what the project, these crossover objectives and a project coming out of that would look like, a grant opportunity appeared as though from above, very fortuitously too, because our institutions were all facing a lot of fiscal restrictions and resource ambiguity because of the global pandemic. The University of Illinois, and Sally mentioned this as well, was awarded a large grant from the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation to basically administer small to medium grants specifically geared towards building capacity and community for email archiving. And it's called EABCC, Email Archiving, Building Capacity and Community. So there are 2 cycles of grant awardees, and we were honored to receive funding for our project for the first cycle beginning in 2021. And it all dovetailed really perfectly, actually, because the idea for the EABCC grant program was motivated by the same CLIR report that inspired our project. And thanks, Stephen, you linked to that. And that's like I think the front page for that. So if you go to about this opportunity from there, you'll get to read more about it. So what is our project? The primary objective of our merged project is to integrate long-term email preservation functionality into Stanford University's open source ePADD tool, which already supports archival appraisal, processing, discovery, and delivery, as Sally gave an overview earlier and a really wonderful demonstration of. When Stephen and I were looking at Harvard's EASE tool, for example, it had processing capabilities and ePADD had processing capabilities, but EASE is a lot more, our Harvard's EASE tool is a lot more focused on maintaining an authentic email record and generating a healthy preservation package for deposit. Since the Palladian team was similarly working on creating preservation packages to deposit into their Preservica repository, and they were contributing to the ePADD code, the most efficacious path forward was embedding that preservation functionality that we had in EASE into ePADD. So our intention is that the enhanced product will provide the digital archiving community with a tool that supports the email archiving lifecycle more robustly. So preservation package exports will be enabled from both the appraisal and processing modules of ePADD so that you can better document significant actions taken to email records, such as format normalization, and retain their full set of headers to maintain their authenticity as a record. Currently, ePADD ingest and export inbox format, as Sally mentioned, I think in the chat answering the question. It also supports IMAP ingest. And we'd like to be able to ingest a wider variety of email formats, as well as offer export of additional preservation-friendly formats like EML. So one way we're attempting to resolve this is by developing the optional integration of a third-party format conversion tool like Aid for Mail or Emailchemy, and that's something that we're looking at as part of this project. And because our preservation infrastructures and workflows across the three institutions vary a little bit, the enhanced ePADD will support functions for local customization and extensibility so that the preservation functions from ePADD are more broadly applicable across diverse institutional needs. That's our hope and our intention. And I think wonderfully too, it's given us an opportunity to bring in other development resources and broaden expertise across the ePADD code base. So I would like to link to a couple of things here. They're closed now, but these were our initial functional requirements that were open for community comment, and that closed in May, but we have been revising them, and we're going to be releasing our updated functional requirements after we've incorporated community feedback and gotten into the code a little bit more. We're going to be doing that soon. And around the same time, we held our first open meeting. So if you're interested in seeing that, it was a recorded presentation, and that's all available at this on the YouTube here, but it's also available on the Phase 4 project tab, which I'll be linking to in a little bit on the ePADD website. This is our project team, and it includes digital preservation and application specialists, special collections directors, archivists, software developers, and consultants, all of whom provide essential support and input. It was crucial for us to have Stanford and Amuse Labs. Amuse Labs were actually the primary developers of ePADD that have been working with Stanford for a long time. Crucial to have them as part of this collaboration because even though Manchester and Harvard are iterating on this project, it's been their baby. They have all the legacy knowledge and expertise to help guide Harvard and Manchester in responsibly iterating on the ePADD code and sustainably doing it. It's also been really exciting to bridge countries on this project and focus on developing the ePADD community more internationally. So this is a very simplified high-level perspective of our timeline. The planning, outreach, and requirements refinement took a little longer than anticipated as it goes on projects, but we are finally in the actual development stage. We plan on hosting another community meeting when we're ready for a beta demo, and then a final launch demonstration when the project is finished. We don't have dates for those yet. Those are TBA, but I can tell you how to keep up to date with our projects so you will know when we do announce them. Stephen linked to the Harvard Preservation website earlier, which has information and ultimately links to here as well, which is the ePADD site that has information under phase 4 of the project, or the EABCC funded section of it. We will be holding, as I mentioned, upcoming meetings. Those dates will be announced, but they'll be announced through some of the channels that I'm listing here. And we're going to make sure that whenever we do, we're not just hitting the ePADD user listserv. We're going to be, trying to get as broad of listserv deployment as possible to really capture everybody. But we do have this form that you can sign up on. Trying to collect potential community testers. So if you're interested in that, there's a form there. Sally mentioned this earlier, but this is the ePADD user listserv. And finally, a link to the website of the ePADD Twitter account. But I think it's pretty simple to find the handle there. So I think we can open it up to questions across all the projects now, or all the phases of the project, really. But if you have any lingering questions about the ePADD plus projects specifically that don't get answered in the discussion today, or you think of them later, please feel free to reach out to any of the folks listed here, including myself. Stephen Abrams, as I mentioned, our head of digital preservation at Harvard, is the PI on this grant phase of the project. And Jess Smith from Manchester and I are the co-project managers. But you can reach out to Sally too. We're all in collaboration. We're all on this project together. So we can always triage you to the right place. And I will go ahead. I'll leave that up for a second in case anyone needs to jot down those contacts, but yeah, I think we're ready for questions. Dream team, that's right, Jess.
Thank you so much, Tricia, and thank you for all the resources that you see with everybody sharing with everyone. I hope the audience is getting all of these stuff straight away. Now, while our group is, I noticed there's a lot of people who have been disconnected. I think we have issues with, as I mentioned, Yana, it's the some of the setup of the government laptops. But I just wanted to do like a round table first. So maybe Tricia and Stephen, you could start. So our audience right now there's a number of universities that I've noticed, and there's a number of national archives that are represented. So in terms of the viewpoint of those in that area, what could you say on the ePADD? So let's start with, you just did your presentation, maybe Tricia and Stephen, and then we go to Sally, and then we go back to Manchester. So Harvard first.
Yeah, so I'm actually, sorry, I was just drawing up some quick other links to resources that might better support. Sometimes I've taught a couple of classes on email archiving, and something that prevents people from sometimes using ePADD specifically, and it'd be interesting to address in the future, are that some government institutions aren't able to use ePADD as an open source product, or because I can't recall the other restrictions offhand, but I'm actually going to grab a couple of government record specific email tools that I know about that I'd like to go ahead and plug in here. Darkmail, which was developed by the Smithsonian Institution, and Tomes, which was developed by I think the North Carolina State Archives. Correct me if I'm wrong on either of those.
Another reason why we were very much interested in using ePADD as the common platform for our email archiving activity moving forward is that our current system, which Tricia alluded to earlier, is a hosted system, and that would raise all sorts of questions, particularly with regard to information privacy requirements at various types of institutions, including governmental ones. ePADD is essentially is a desktop application. So the collections that come in do not have to leave your institutional boundaries. And as long as that local deployment is conforming to whatever restrictions are necessary in terms of local policy, then that actually simplifies things quite a bit.
Thank you, guys. And Sally?
Yeah, that's a really great question about getting authorization to use this open source software, because it is a barrier for some people, depending on their institution's policies. It's something that we've had discussions with. I know the Library of Congress here in the US, they have a procedure for approving open source software. Even some publicly funded universities in the States have a similar requirement. And we've worked with some archivists at those universities to kind of answer their IT department's questions about the software and the specifications of it. In some cases, they've been able to get it approved. So if you do find yourself in that situation, please do reach out to us, because we may be able to kind of bridge that gap and provide whatever information is required to get it approved. I know that we have also worked with a few national libraries in other countries that have used ePADD to process their collections, like the National Library of New Zealand, the British Library, actually, and the National Library of France have all used ePADD, currently use it in their processing workflow. So I think it really just depends on the policy of your institution.
Thank you, Sally. And Manchester, there's quite a number of universities on our audience, in our audience right now. Here you go, Jess, Paul, and Hokin.
Yes, indeed. I think the biggest barrier that we found is the slight difference between data protection law between America and ourselves. Not an insurmountable issue, but an issue whereby there were far more checks and balances that my institution wished to sort of adhere to or impose or have signed off than were necessarily required at Stanford. But they've been very, very generous in working with us to try and answer all the questions that our legal team have been having about why I want to host this data outside of the UK. Even just the metadata, they're still getting a bit twitchy.
Paul?
Yeah, I would say with the collection that we're working with, it probably doesn't have the same difficulties that a government archive would have. It doesn't have the same complexity, so I think it works fairly well with a small organisation like Carcanet, where we know how many employees there are. Very few there. They all occupy the same room, so it's I think easier to work with an organisation like Carcanet using ePADD than it might be with government. But I'd be interested to see how it would work with government archives, actually, and the complexity that they have.
Maybe, sorry, okay, a technical perspective when you got involved with the project at Manchester?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite a well-documented open source software, and it's all on Git and stuff, and the developers are quite responsive. So yeah, it's quite a pleasure to work on it. I enjoy it.
Okay, and we've got all the information for the universities who are in our audience right now. I think everyone has shared what they have. And Yana, yeah, maybe unmute, and then you could give your perspective on the UK government organizations.
Yeah, I'm saving my camera because I maybe cut off again. So yeah, I work for the UK Research and Innovation, which is consists of the research councils and a couple of other organizations, and we have just particularly under the British Geological Survey, we've just gained the cybersecurity certification, and traditionally I've used a couple of applications which I'm now told I'm not allowed to use anymore. So I'm just reassessing what kind of implications the cybersecurity compliance requirements have on the way we work. And at the same time, I work for the National Geoscience Data Center. So we are trying to work with open data, make everything available. So that link between openness and security, we are still sort of trying to find the right balance so as to work in a way that we support all our operations, including the digital preservation side, and then make sure that we are as safe in the cyber world as possible. And I'm sure Paulina mentioned also it's an issue with your employer too, and there may be others in the audience who recognize this tension between the two areas in your work.
Yes, that seems Paulina is trying to type. It would have been good to I know that I don't this is me again trying to put certain people on the spotlight because I saw their names in our audience. We actually have several government organizations in the audience. So I won't say the names, but if you want to say something, I know that Peter is there for Australia, but he might have been bailed out because it's early morning in Australia now. But I wonder if some of the government organizations would have some questions with this one. Has there been, in terms of, is it correct? Because this is not my area of expertise. Have you had experience with the end life cycle of the archives where transfer is needed to the main national archives, or has that happened already, or is it still within the limits of the
Yeah,
of the
I can
institution?
maybe chip in with two things there. Well, first of all,
Yes,
we are a national, a place of deposit under the National Archives, so we don't actually need to transfer our archives anywhere else. We look after them ourselves. And the other thing that is relevant to particularly this webinar is that I'm aware that the UKRI are putting together their email preservation policy, and I can't even remember what they're calling it. It's probably not preservation policy, but sort of trying to properly manage the email archives that at the moment are in people's inboxes and PSD files and wherever they are. And because there are so many organizations involved, and even under this umbrella, and every organization have traditionally been doing their own thing, then it's quite challenging to introduce best practice. So there may be scope to for a small group to look at the tools such as ePADD and others that Tricia has kindly listed to the chat, and sort of see if there's a possibility for us to first look into those, how plausible it is to introduce that across a large government organization, whilst looking at the other compliance issues that we may have. And then share our experiences and learning out of that process. And there seems to be quite a lot of material out there already from Manchester to other organizations that would be useful in that process.
Okay, thank you.
So Maria, if I could say a few words along this vein. While I think it is certainly true that we in the U.S. Do not have the same level of formality and or legal or statutory definition of requirements that you certainly have in Europe and in other international contexts. That's not to say that we do not take these issues quite seriously ourselves. I know at Harvard as an organization, and I know Stanford also. We're always thinking and working through these issues with regard to all the secure management of all types of sensitive information, not just email. We are both research-intensive universities with heavy involvement, particularly in biomedical research areas that generates all sorts of clinical information and other sorts of things. I know that our university archives does collect a lot of potentially sensitive email as part of its archival records schedule. And we've been dealing with that, easily for 10 years with our own homegrown systems. There are secure storage facilities that we have in place to ensure that there is limited, minimally necessary access to that material. And to a certain extent, this is merely a continuation of what we've always done, with our tangible collections, for certainly the last 100 years, because these issues are not new in the digital realm. They're just potentially made a little bit more problematic, and the solutions are a little bit different. But in fact, there's a large and long-standing body of archival practice that guides how we deal with this material.
Thank you so much, Stephen. And yes. One thing I would say before we can close this one is it would be very interesting to have you guys back after 6 months to a year, because really we hope that what we've given this audience is that motivation to reach out to you guys and participate in the ePADD and make it continuously improve it for everybody, considering what it is. It's open source and all that, and we're all for that in this day and age and these times, and of course later on, when we have our individual discussions with the National Archives as well, it's one of those things that Ren will probably ask them later on, because we do have that. I know they're in the audience right now. I don't want to put them on the spot, but we do have that community of National Archives as well, who follow these things very, very closely. For the US, Nara is still there. Beth is still there. So, and Beth has always been a very a good. Has supported us really well. And thank you very much. As I mentioned, Yana, maybe we should put this again after 6 months or a year, and would be really brilliant to see the collaboration and the cooperation that has happened then.
I think that would be fantastic. And just to say that our IRMS Digital Preservation Group is a fairly new concept. We've only been together this year in 2021. So once we are gelled a bit more as a group, it would be fantastic to hear more about you and get our members implementing some of this learning.
I totally agree. I was going to say that as well, we have the IRMS conference in Glasgow in May next year, which might be good timing.
Oh, that sounds like an invitation. Beth, thank you so much. So Beth, I would be interested in exploring more about how if federal agencies could use ePADD. So, yep, Beth Cron at NARA is really runs a number of groups with the agency. So, yep, it would be great if you guys could coordinate, Beth, from the NARA perspective. And with that, with 1 minute on the go, let me just thank you, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you, Sally, for waking up so early, and everybody else for waking up so early. Thank you so much for those in Asia who's in the evening or early morning, 1 o'clock in the morning right now. Thank you, everyone. I will hand over to Copolo for our closing things, and that's brilliant. Have a lovely day for everyone starting their day. Copolo, handing it over to you.
Thank you, Maria. Everybody, I would like to thank you all for coming to this presentation. And as Maria said earlier, it's recorded, and you will get a link to the recording after this. And some of the resources will also be available in the IRMS web pages. And if you'd like to join IRMS to get advanced notification of some of these fantastic presentations, that would be very welcome. And I'm also to plug a couple of events that are coming up for IM Tech, which are on the 7th of October, Microsoft 365 Communication Compliance with a couple of guys from Microsoft, Christopher Feisinger and Patrick David, and another one that's coming up on the 14th of October, a primer on principles of retention with MVP Joanne Klein, which we hope will be really good. And if you can attend or register, comms will be coming out for that shortly. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much as well. And keep safe and well, everyone. And have a lovely day, evening, morning, whatever. Thank you so much, guys. Take care.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.